Chapter 12 of the surprising adventures of Bampfylde Moore Carew, King of the Beggars, by Bampfylde Moore Carew. This recording is in the public domain. The first house he went to was a barber's, of whose assistance he had indeed need enough, not having shaved his beard since he left the ship. Here he told a moving story, saying his name was John Elworth of Bristol, that he had been artfully kidnapped by one Samuel Ball, of the same place, and gone through great hardships in making his escape. The good barber, moved by his tale, willingly lent his assistance to take off his beard. During the operation he entered into a good deal of chat, telling him his father was of Exeter, and when he went away gave him a half-crown bill, and he recommended him to Mr. Wiggle, a Quaker of the same place. Here he told his moving story again, and got a 10-shilling bill from Mr. Wiggle, with recommendations to the rest of the Quakers of the place, among whom he got a great deal of money. When he took his leave, he was recommended by them to the Quakers of a town called Castile. Here he found a great deal of favour, and made the best of his way to Brandywine Ferry, in which is room enough to lay up the whole Royal Navy of England, and from thence to Chester, so called, because the people who first settled there came for the most part from Cheshire. It contains above 100 houses, and a very good road for shipping, the Delaware, on which it stands, being about 3 miles over. Here are a court house and a prison. This place is also called Upland, and has a church dedicated to St. Paul, with a numerous congregation of those whom, exclusive of all other Christians, we call orthodox. Mr. Carew came here on Sunday, stayed all the night, and the next morning he inquired out one Mrs. Turner, a Quaker, who formerly lived in Embercombe, by Minehead, in Somersetshire. From her he got a bill and a recommendation to some Quakers at Derby, about 5 miles further, where she told him he would find Mr. Whitfield. On hearing this, he set out for Derby, but before he reached there, was overtaken by hundreds of people going to hear Mr. Whitfield preach. Friend, says he to one of them, where are you going so fast? Hast thou not heard, friend, says the other, the second Christ is come? He then joined them, and they all proceeded to Derby, where he found Mr. Whitfield preaching in an orchard, but could not get near enough to hear his discourse, by reason of the great concourse of people. However, he seemed to be affected with it, and strictly imitated the Quakers in all their sighs, groans, lifting up of the eyes, etc. Leaving them, he went to the sign of the Ship, and inquiring where Mr. Whitfield lodged that night, was told at the justice's, who was a miller. He then asked if he could have a bed there that night, and being told that he might, he passed the evening very cheerfully. In the morning he asked for pen, ink, and paper, soon drew up a moving petition in the name of John Moore, the son of a clergyman, who had been taken on board the Tiger, Captain Matthews, and carried into the Havana, from whence he had got his redemption by means of the governor of Annapolis; that he was in the most deplorable circumstances, having nothing to help himself with, and hoped he would commiserate his condition. Having finished his petition, away he went to the miller's house, where Mr. Whitfield lodged, and found 100 people waiting at the door to speak to that gentleman. Looking narrowly around, he espied a young lad, whom he found belonged to Mr. Whitfield, and going up to him very civilly, he begged he would do an unfortunate man the kindness to present that paper, giving him his petition, to Mr. Whitfield. And as soon as they perceived him, the Quakers pressed round him, one crying, Pray thee, friend, come and pray by my dear wife, and another, Pray thee, friend, come and see my dear brother. Mr. Whitfield made his way through them all, as well as he could, towards Mr. Carew, whom the young lad pointed out to him. When he came up to him, he kindly said that he was heartily sorry for his misfortunes, but that we were all liable to them, that they happened by the will of God, and therefore it was our duty to submit to them with patience and resignation. Then pulling out his pocket book, he gave him 3 or 4 pounds of that county paper money. Mr. Carew returned him thanks with all the marks of the most lively gratitude, and Mr. Whitfield, wishing him well to England, went away singing psalms with those that were about him, and we make no doubt but Mr. Carew joined with them in the melody of the heart, for the good success he had had with Mr. Whitfield. From hence Bampfylde was only 7 miles to the city of Philadelphia, which is one of the finest in all America, and one of the best laid out cities in the world. It is the capital of Pennsylvania, and were it full of houses and inhabitants according to the proprietor's plan, it would be a capital fit for a great empire. Yet it is a large city, considering its late foundation, most commodiously situated between 2 navigable rivers, the Delaware and Schuylkill. He designed the town in form of an oblong square extending 2 miles in length from one river to the other. The long streets, 8 in number, and 2 miles in length, he cut in right angles by others of 1 mile in length, and 16 in number, all straight and spacious. He left proper spaces for markets, parades, quays, meeting houses, schools, hospitals, and other public buildings. There are a great number of houses, and it increases every day in buildings, which are all carried on regularly, according to the first plan. The city has 2 fronts on the water, one on the east side facing the Schuylkill, and the other on the west facing the Delaware, which is near 2 miles broad, and navigable 300 miles, at least for small vessels. The eastern part is the most populous on account of the Schuylkill, which is navigable 800 miles above the falls. We have observed that each front of the street was to be 2 miles from river to river, as it was at first laid out, but one cannot suppose that it is finished in that manner. The streets that run against the Schuylkill are 3/4 of a mile in length. The houses are stately, the wharves and warehouses numerous and convenient. This city flourished so much at first, that there were near 100 houses, great and small, in it, in less than a year's time, and it has made answerable progress since that period, the number of houses at this time being about 2000, and, generally speaking, better edifices than in the cities of England, a few excepted, and those only in a few streets. All the houses have large orchards and gardens belonging to them. The land on which the city stands is high and firm, and the convenience of covered docks and springs have very much contributed to the commerce of this place, where many rich merchants now reside, some of whom are so wealthy that they keep their coaches. Ships may ride in 6 or 7 fathoms water, with a very good anchorage. The land about it is a dry, wholesome level. All owners of 1,000 acres and upwards have their houses in the 2 fronts facing the rivers, and in the High Street, running from the middle of one front to the middle of the other. Every owner of 1,000 acres has about an acre in front, and the smaller purchasers about half an acre in the back streets, by which means the least has room enough for a house garden and small orchard. High Street is 100 feet broad, so is Broad Street, which is in the middle of the city, running from north to south. In the centre is a square of 10 acres, for the State House, Market House, and School House, as before hinted. The names of the streets here denote the several sorts of timber that are common in Pennsylvania, as Mulberry Street, Sassafras Street, Chestnut Street, Walnut Street, Beech Street, Ash Street, Vine Street, Cedar Street. There are also King Street, Broad Street, High Street. Their courthouse is built of brick, and under it is a prison. Several houses on the quay are worth £4,000 or £5,000, and 13 ships have been on the stocks at a time. Some hundreds have been built there. The cellars and warehouses on the quay are made over the river 3 stories high. Here are 2 fairs in a year, and 2 markets in a week. It sends 2 members to the assembly. The inhabitants were at first mostly Quakers, and so they continue. It was some time before there was a church built after the manner of England, but as soon as one was built, it was called Christ Church. It had in a few years a very numerous congregation, and King William ordered an allowance of £53 a year to the minister, which with voluntary contributions made a very handsome provision for him. There are about 1,200 of the inhabitants that are of this congregation. who have for some years had the benefit of the organ, and though it looked and sounded strange to the Quakers at first, yet they are now so far reconciled to it, as to bear with their neighbours having it without grumbling. There are besides this several meeting houses, viz. For the Quakers, who are properly the church as by law established, being the originals, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, and a Spanish church. According to the plan, there is in each quarter of the city a square of 8 acres, intended for the same uses as were Moorfields in London, walks and exercises for the citizens. The great dock is formed by an inlet of the river Delaware, at the south corner of the front of the wharves, and has a bridge over it at the entrance. Several creeks run into the city out of the 2 rivers, and there is no city in Holland that is so naturally accommodated with fine and commodious canals as this might very easily be. The quay is beautiful, about 200 feet square, to which a ship of 500 tons may lay her broadside, and as these surprising advantages have already rendered it one of the best trading towns in the British Empire out of Europe, so in all probability it will continue to increase in commerce, riches, and buildings, till for number and magnificence it will have no equal in America, where the French have not, nor are likely to have, any thing like it. Here are almost all sorts of trades and mechanics, as well as merchants and planters. Here the assemblies and courts of judicature are held, and the business of the province is chiefly managed, as in all capitals. Here are printing houses, and several newspapers published. In a word, here are all things necessary for an Englishman's profit and pleasure. Mr. Carew, walking through the High Street, had a mind to refresh himself with a nip of punch. The first public house he chanced to come to was kept by an Irishman, and asking him if he sold punch. Yes, my dear honey, replied the man. Arrah, says Mr. Carew, are you my countryman, dear joy? Quite in the Irish brogue. Yes, replied the man. What, do you belong to one of our vessels? No, but I belong to Captain Du Bois of Dublin, who was taken off the Capes and carried into the Havana. Arrah, dear joy, I know Captain Du Bois very well, replied the Irishman. Come in. Accordingly, in went Mr. Carew. The Irishman was so well pleased with his countryman, for giving a very particular account of many places in Ireland, and counterfeiting the brogue extremely well, he did not suspect him to be any other, that he entertained him kindly, and they passed the day merrily together. The next morning his host takes him out to see the city. Mr. Carew did not content himself with idly gazing, as most of our modern travellers do, but diligently inquired the names of the principal merchants and places, and informed himself of all those circumstances which could be of any service to him. At length, seeing a very fine house, he inquired whose it was, and being told Proprietor Penn's, who was just come from England with his brother-in-law Captain Frame, he takes leave of his host, telling him he had a little business to transact, and would be at home presently, for he should be able to find his way back without his staying for him. Having thus got rid of the Irishman, he claps his right hand into his coat, as if he had lost the use of it, and then going up to the proprietor's, knocks at the door, which was opened to him by a negro, with a silver collar round his neck. He inquired if the proprietor lived there, and if he was at home. Being told he was, pray tell him, says he, that a poor man desires the favour of speaking with him. The negro then bid him come into the court. Soon after, out came the proprietor, very plainly dressed, and his brother Captain Frame in his regimentals. The proprietor came up to him, inquiring who he was, and what he wanted with him. He replied he was a poor unfortunate man, who craved his honour's charitable assistance, that his name was John Dawkins, of the city of Exeter, and that he belonged to Captain Davis' ship of that place, who was taken near the Capes. Captain Frame, seeing him a lusty tall fellow, presently cries out, Revenge, revenge! My brave boy, you shall go along with me and fight the dogs. Mr. Carew replied with a sigh that he should be glad to do that, but that it was his misfortune by the severities and hardships in prison to have lost the use of his right arm by the dead palsy. This moved their compassion so much that each of them gave him a guinea, the proprietor telling him he would take care to send him home with Captain Reed, who would sail very soon. Then asking him if he had been at the governor's, and he replying in the negative, the proprietor told him he should go there, for he was a very good-natured man, and would assist him. Then calling to the black, he bid him show the poor man to the governor's. As they were going along, he informed himself of the black what countryman the governor was, and being told a Welshman, and his name Thomas, he took care to make his advantage of it. When he came to the governor's and inquired for him, he was told he was walking in the garden. While he was waiting for his coming out, in came the proprietor and his brother, and going into the garden, they represented his case to the governor, who, coming in, inquired where he was born, etc. He told them, as he had before done the proprietor, and added, that he had married Betty Larkey, Parson Griffy's maid of Wales, and that the parson had a son at Bishop's Nympton, in Devon. The governor replied he knew the parson very well, and likewise Betty Larkey, and after he had asked him some questions about them, which Mr. Carew answered very readily, he gave him 2 guineas. In this manner did he apply to the most of the principal merchants of Philadelphia, always suiting some circumstances of his story in particular to the person he applied to, which he did by diligently inquiring what places they came from in England, who were their friends and acquaintance, and the like, which he knew how to suit most to his purpose. Captain Reed being now ready to sail, and Mr. Carew having a curiosity of seeing more of the country, he thought proper to leave Philadelphia without taking leave of any of his good friends there. From this place he went into Buckingham county, where he inquired for one George Boone, a justice of the peace in that county, who formerly lived in Bradnick in Devon, his father being a weaver there. Here he went by his own name, telling him he had been taken prisoner and carried into the Havannah, where he had lain many months. The justice, having known his father very well, entertained him generously, showing him the country, and giving him 3 guineas at his departure to help to pay his passage. From thence he went to Burlington, the first town in West New Jersey, which contains about 250 families, and has an answerable number of acres laid out for plantations. The houses are well built, and almost all of brick. The market affords plenty of all sorts of provisions, which are as good here as anywhere in America. From thence to Perth Amboy, so called in honour of the Duke of Perth. It is at the mouth of the Rantan, which runs into Sandy Hook Bay, and is able to contain 500 ships. The plan of this city was laid out very regularly and spaciously. The plot of ground was divided into 150 shares, for purchasers to build upon. 4 acres are preserved for a market place, and 3 for public wharfage, very useful things if there had been inhabitants, trade, and shipping. The town being thus skilfully and commodiously laid out, some Scots began building, especially a house for the governor, which was then as little wanted as a wharf or a market. The whole plan of the city consists of 1,079 acres, and there are 2 good roads from it to Piscataqua and Woodbridge. Ships in one tide can come up to the port, and be at the merchants' doors, though of 300 tons burden, but the Perth city has not above 200 or 300 men, women, and children. From thence, over a ferry into a town called Trent Town, in Staten Island, and from thence over Brunswick ferry to East Jersey, where he found out a Mr. Matthews, a miller, who formerly lived at Whitechurch near Lyme in Dorset, and making use of his old story of having been taken, he was received by Mr. Matthews with great hospitality. He kept him 3 days in his house, and would have entertained him still longer. At his departure he gave him a guinea, with several letters of recommendation, and remitted letters by him to his friends in England. sending his servant with him as far as Elizabethtown, which is 3 miles within a creek opposite to the west end of Staten Island. Here the first English settlement was made, and if any place in the Jerseys may be said to have thriven, it is this, for notwithstanding the endeavours of the proprietors to make a capital of Perth by calling it a city, Elizabethtown has near 6 times the number of inhabitants, containing above 250 families, and 40,000 acres of land laid out. Here the proprietors have a plantation, which goes by the name of their farm. The government of the province is here managed, courts are kept, assemblies held, and the greatest part of the trade of the colony carried on. Here he met with one Mr. Nicholas, a Cornishman, who gave him a 10-shilling note, and recommended him to one Mr. Anderson in Long Island, sometimes called Nassau Island, stretching from Fairfield county in a fine spot of ground 150 miles in length and 20 in breadth. Here he changed his religion and turned Presbyterian, most of the inhabitants being of that denomination. He travelled quite through the island, and then crossed over a ferry into Block Island, from whence there are great quantities of timber transported to the town of Boston. Soon after, crossing another ferry, he came into New York, which is a very fine city. There are now about 1,100 houses, and near 7,000 inhabitants in it. The houses are well built. The meanest of them is said to be worth £100, which cannot be said of any city in England. The great church here was built in the year 1695, and is a very handsome edifice. Here are also a Dutch church, a French church, and a Lutheran church. The inhabitants of the Dutch extraction make a very considerable part of the town, but most of them speaking English, one may suppose they went pretty much to the great church, especially all those that are and hope to be in offices. Here he was surprised at the sight of a great number of gibbets, with blacks hanging upon them, but upon inquiring he found the negroes had not long before entered into a conspiracy for burning the whole city. However, the plot being timely discovered, great numbers were executed and hung up to terrify others. His first care here was to inquire the names, circumstances, families, and countries of the principal inhabitants of the city. Amongst the rest he inquired out Captain Lush, who was formerly of Carmouth by Lyme in Dorsetshire, to whom he had recommendatory letters from Mr. Matthews of East Jersey. He was received very hospitably by Captain Lush, who likewise gave him 2 shirts, and informed him there was no ship ready to sail for England there, but that he would find one at New London, having found there was one Mr. Lucas, formerly of Taunton, in Somersetshire, in New York, and judging he was brother to Mr. Lucas of Brampton in Devon, whom he knew very well, he went boldly to his house, which was in the fish shambles, and knocking at the door, it was opened to him by a negro. He inquired if Mr. Lucas was at home, and before the negro could give him an answer, out came Mr. Lucas with a little boy, and demanded what he wanted. He replied he was an Englishman born in Devonshire, who had the misfortune to be cast away in a ship behind Long Island, and hearing his name was Lucas, he had made bold to apply to him for his assistance, as he was very well acquainted with his brother Mr. Lucas of Brampton. Mr. Lucas asked him if he could tell him whom his brother married. He replied, Mrs. Mary Tristram. Do you know Huntsome? Yes, replied he, and Mr. Beer, who first courted Mrs. Tristram. And how many children has my brother? To this likewise Mr. Carew answered very exactly, and Mr. Lucas, being convinced by this of his being no impostor, bid him come in, telling him he expected his younger brother there in 3 weeks' time. He was entertained here very generously, and at his departure Mr. Lucas gave him 2 guineas. From thence he went through Seabrake and Seaford to New London, which is situated on a river called the Thames, the first branch of which river goes by the name of Glass River, the next branch by that of Russell's Delight, and the third by that of Indian River. There is a small river which falls into the sea at Manchester, the The trade of ship building flourishes here. He now inquired if there were none of the name of Davy in that city, and being asked why, he replied, they were near heirs to a fine estate near Crediton in Devon, formerly belonging to Sir John Davy. He was then shown to two ancient sisters of Sir John Davy, whose sons were timbermen. They asked a great many questions about the family, and he told them that Sir John Davy was dead, and his eldest son also, who had left two sons, that the youngest brother, Humphrey Davy, was then living at Creedy House, and the little boys somewhere about Exeter. Then they gave him two letters to give to Mr. Humphrey Davy, after which each gave him a guinea, with recommendations to one Justice Miller and Captain Rogers, who was bound for England. Justice Miller received him very kindly, with whom he agreed to take a run to England for 10 gallons of rum, 10 pounds of sugar, 10 pounds of tobacco, and 10 pipes. Chapter 12.